Hello and welcome to The Woven Word. This is one in a series of immersive 360-degree videos in which we're going to introduce you to some of Ulster's rhyming weaver poets. The rhyming weavers are a group of writers who flourished in the 18th and the 19th centuries, and they wrote in their own vernacular Ulster-Scots language. They were working class people. They were farmers and teachers and weavers and gunsmiths. And the language that they write in is the language of hearth and home. This is the language they would have used when conversing, when speaking with friends, when writing and when reading aloud their work. And they're writing about ordinary things. They're writing about the weather. They're writing about their landlords. They're writing about their neighbours. They're writing about nature and the landscape. Their poetry really shines a light into this very interesting period in Ulster's history. Now, as I mentioned, this is a 360-degree immersive video. What does that mean? It means that if you're at home with your computer, you can use your mouse and look all around you. Or if you've got a VR headset, put that on and you'll have a fully immersive experience looking around with me at this wonderful room. This is the Governor's Room in Belfast's Linen Hall Library. There's lovely panelling in the walls, rich wooden tables, beautiful wooden bookcases all around us. This one to my left is full of material known as Burnsiana. Burnsiana means it's by the Scottish poet Robert Burns or it's about the Scottish poet Robert Burns. There's actually a portrait of him on the wall. If you turn around and look behind you virtually, you'll see that portrait. And just outside the Governor's Room at the top of the old stone staircase into the Linen Hall Library, there is Ireland's only statue of the Scottish bard. Why have we come here? Well, this is a good place to talk about Samuel Thomson, also known as the father of the rhyming weavers or the bard of Carngranny. Carngranny is a townland in mid-Antrim. That was where he lived. It's quite near where Belfast International Airport is today. He was born in 1766, and although we call him the father of the rhyming weavers, he was actually a school teacher himself. He was a poet, he was an intellectual, he was a thinker, and he was very much at the heart of a group of poets who flourished at that time and who would have come to his cottage. Crambo Cave, it was called. Crambo was a popular rhyming game at the time when people would kind of extempore make up words of poetry. So Crambo Cave, his home. When Belfast Linen Hall Library, or when the Belfast Linen Hall used to stand in Donegal Square here, it was a white linen hall. It was where the Belfast Reading Society was formed. Later, it came to this building, and Belfast Reading Society would have been known to Samuel Thomson. But more importantly, Robert Burns was known to Samuel Thomson. The two of them corresponded. Samuel Thomson, memorably, travelled to Dumfries to Scotland and met the Ayrshire bard, and Robert Burns gave him a poem to bring back home with him again. Robert Burns brought out his first book of poetry in Kilmarnock in Scotland. 6 years later, Samuel Thomson brought out his collection of poetry, and he actually dedicated it to Robert Burns. Samuel Thomson's own poetry is wonderful. He was living at a time when there was political unrest in Ireland. This was the age of the Society of United Irishmen. In fact, Samuel Thomson's first poems were published in their newspaper, the Northern Star. He was patriotic. He was disgusted at the landlords racking the tenants' rent. He was sensitive. He loved nature. He was a great friend. He was thoughtful. You know, he was a real character of his time. But he died very young. He was only 50 when he died in May 1816, and he's buried in an unmarked grave, largely forgotten. This series will hopefully bring him back to the public consciousness again. His poetry deserves to be remembered. You're shortly going to hear my friend and colleague, John Erskine, reading you one of Samuel Thomson's poems, The Hawk and the Weasel. It's a marvellous poem. It's about a young girl called Lizzie. She's heading off to the market one day and she sees a weasel, the old word is a wutrick, at play in a meadow. And as the weasel's out in the field, a hawk comes down and seizes the weasel and takes off into the sky. But as it flies up, the weasel gets its throat. It punctures the hawk's throat. They both come back down onto land again. The weasel runs away and the hawk dies. So there's a lesson there, you know, if someone attacks someone meaning harm, it may be them who falls foul at the end. There's some beautiful vocabulary in the poem. Let me give you some words to look out for. So, what about a pickle yarn? A pickle yarn is a small amount of thread What drick is a weasel? She dichted baith her in. That means she kind of wiped both of her eyes. The deil at freaks. The deil is the devil up to mischief. A gled, if you hear the word gled, that's a hawk. Ere it wist means before it knew what was happening. The goss is the bird. The word sign, like owl lang syne, means then. Dun he dated on a dyke. That means the bird drifted down onto a stone wall. His thrapple ate in twa, his throat eaten into two. The verb to gree means to have a taste for. The delightful expression to drink o' their ain brewing. It literally means to drink something that they brewed themselves, but we might say to get a taste of their own medicine. You're going to hear all of these delightful Ulster-Scots words and phrases and pronunciations in this poem, The Hawk and the Weasel. Now, while you're listening, you're going to see the words. They're going to appear on the screen so you can read and hear at the same time. Or if you jump forward about a minute and a half, instead you can just listen to the poem while you enjoy a virtual tour of this beautiful library. You'll see different scenes from the library. If you use the expand the description functionality on YouTube, you'll be able to jump to the relevant places. So I hope you've enjoyed that introduction to Samuel Thomson, and now you will enjoy his wonderful poem, The Hawk and Weasel, read by John Erskine. Thank you.
The Hawk and Weasel by Sam Thomson. Tae tune ae morn as Lizzie hied to sell a pickle yarn, a wanton whitrat she espied a sportin' at a cairn. Along the heath beskirted green, it played wi' mony a wheel. She stood and ducked baith her een, and thocht it was the deil she saw at freaks. But soon her doubts were a' dismissed. A gled come whistling by, and seized the weasel, ere it wist 'twas halfway at the sky. But soon the goss grew feeble-like, and syne began to fa, till doon he dated on a dyke, his thrapple ate in twa. Let him snuff that. The weasel off in triumph walks, and left the bloodless glutton, a warning sad to future hawks that green for weasel's mutton. So reprobates that spiteful cross decree their neighbour's ruin are often forced like foolish goss to drink o' their ain brewin'. Wha says it's wrong? The Hawk and Weasel by Sam Thomson. Tae tune ae morn as Lizzie hied to sell a pickle yarn, a wanton whitrat she espied a sportin' at a cairn. Along the heath beskirted green, it played wi' mony a wheel. She stood and ducked baith her een, and thocht it was the deil she saw at freaks. But soon her doubts were a' dismissed. A gled come whistling by, and seized the weasel, ere it wist 'twas halfway at the sky. But soon the goss grew feeble-like, and syne began to fa, till doon he dated on a dyke, his thrapple ate in twa. Let him snuff that. The weasel off in triumph walks, and left the bloodless glutton, a warning sad to future hawks that green for weasel's mutton. So reprobates that spiteful cross decree their neighbour's ruin are often forced like foolish goss to drink o' their ain brewin'. Wha says it's wrong?